Hello everyone, welcome again back to my YouTube channel. And in this entire series, we are learning how to crack coding interviews easily. And now in this particular video, I will focus on solving a HashMap question, right? So basically in the entire series, we will just learn 10 HashMap questions, and these are sufficient to make you ready for any coding interview and crack that coding interview easily. So in this entire playlist, we will learn the way to approach a coding problem also, okay, in the interview. And also just one request, so just be ready with some compiler so that you can code it yourself, okay. And also I have handpicked just 10 questions from like more than 500 questions that I have solved, and I think if you are able to learn HashMap through these 10 coding questions, then you are good to go. You don't need to solve as many as question like 500 plus, but if you have time, then definitely it makes sense to solve more questions, right? And also there are two things. So one thing is like for beginner and one thing is for like persons who know coding. So if you don't know coding, then just watch this entire video and see how I'm approaching the problem. And if you are experienced, just pause this interview now and then attempt it for the next 15 minutes, okay, and see how you are performing, okay. So now for next, so basically I've given a time of just 15 minutes for this question. If this question was asked in the interview, it was an easy question on Leetcode as well, so its time limit is just 15 minutes, okay. So now let's see how I will, for example, if this question was asked to me, how I will attempt that, I will show you now, okay. And before there, right, so as in my previous playlist, I told you like 3 golden rules that you need to follow. So just if you haven't watched that, just go ahead and watch it, because those are very important. Those are like foundation of everything. Whatever we will do from now onwards, that depends on that, right? So just go and see that. Now I'm attempting the problem, okay. So let me just attempt this problem. So I'm just going, so as I said, right, so first thing that you need to do here is just read the question carefully, right, and spend 5 to 10 minutes, okay. But this is an easy question and it's quite straightforward, right? So you can just explain it verbally very easily. So let's understand the question now. So here, like, you will be given an array of integer nums and an integer target, and you have to return indices of 2 numbers so that they adds up to the target, okay. So this question itself is very well explained, right? If you just read first line, then you are able to understand the question very easily, and you can explain it to yourself and to interviewer also in one line, right? So basically you have to just find 2 integers in given array whose sum adds up to the target, and just remember to read all the conditions carefully. So if you see here, right, so it's clearly written like you can assume that there will be exactly one solution, and you may not use the same number twice, right, which means you cannot reuse the element, right? So that you don't need to do. Now let's look at some example. So if you look at first example, 2 7 11 15, right, target is 9. So definitely here, if you iterate, you will be able to find out answer, right? So 2 if you add 2 and 7, then they adds up to 9, right? So that's why you have to return 0 and 1. Now let's see another example, 3 to 4, right? So here output is, if you see 6, so if you add 2 and 4, then it will definitely leads to the answer, which is 1,2. And if you see third example, which is 3,3 and target is 6, then answer is 0 1. If you don't follow this constraint, right, you cannot use same element twice, then its answer can be 0 0 or 1 1, right? But since constraint is given, you need to take care of this. And here also just focus on constraint, but in interview it doesn't matter much. But if you are giving live coding challenges on CodeChef, Topcoder, and so then this matters. But let's understand the constraint also here. So here length of an array can be 10 to the power 4, okay. So I'll tell you like how to read this constraint, okay, when you will formulate an approach. So now our first rule is done. We have understood the question and we will explain it to interviewer as well. So in short, in one line I will explain this. So given an integer array nums, you have to find 2 indices so that the number at those indices sums up to a target, and you have to return those indices. That's done. Now let's jump on to our like second thing, right? So second thing is approach. Here comes the main part, right? Approach. So if you see, so there are 2 things. As I said, let's start with an brute force approach. So what is brute force approach? Brute force approach is nothing. Brute force approach is like if you are telling this question to someone who is not aware of like coding, right? For example, your parents, just go ahead and ask them if given this all numbers and you have to find target 9, what all are the results? So how your mind will work? Your mind will work like this. You will pick a number and then definitely you will check who other numbers who can add up to this, and then give a number 9, right? So in short, you are checking each pair, and then you are finding out which pair sum up to 9, right? So on copy and pen you can list down all the pairs, right? 2,7, then 2,11, like this, right? So that is a brute force approach. Now if you know little bit coding like for loop, while loop, and basic coding, right, then you can tell that approach is a brute force, right? If you apply coding also in it, so that is a brute force approach that you can code also, okay? But you have to, as you have to code, right? So there must be something organized, for example use of for loop, use of while loop, so that you can code it easily. So here in simple word, in 1-2 line, next step what I will do is I will explain interviewer in 1-2 line the brute force approach. How I will explain this, let me explain that, okay? So I will say to him, so basically in this approach I will use, what I will do is I will create all pairs and I will check if that sum is 9, then I will return that pair. And to do that I will use nested loop. So in outer loop I will fix an element and I will try to find out each pair whose first element is this, and in that way I will try to find out each pair and then return the answer, okay? So that is like the brute force approach. So in 1-2 line I have explained them, right? And also I have explained the approach, right, how they will do. And now I will explain them with an example also. For example, I will fix 2 in the outer loop and then I will iterate 7, so it adds up to 9, so that's why we return the answer. But suppose if it was 6, then I will keep on moving the inner loop, right, which is 11, then 2 plus 11 13, then 2 plus 17, and similarly then I will change the outer loop, right? So in outer loop I will switch to 7, okay? And then again in inner loop I will try to find out all pairs starting with 7. So in that way I will explain them, and that's done, right? Now it depends on interviewer whether, depending upon the question, where they want you to proceed with this brute force or they want you to spend more time in optimizing it, right? So as I said, right, so this question definitely we can optimize. So for example, one more approach here can be second brute force I am telling, okay? So second brute force can be, if you think little bit smartly, right? So here 2, right? So you know the target sum. So if you do little with math, right? So for example you have 2 and you want some 9, right? Then it will strike in your mind that you need 7. 9 minus 2, 7. You need 7. If you found 7, then you can find the sum 9, right? So and now how to find 7 from this list. So there is one again very brute force approach, very naive approach to do this is like iterate the entire array and find out 7. For example, if you have 2, right, now you know you want to find out 7. How? You will do 9 minus 2 and you will see 7. So you will search for that entire 7 in the entire list, and if that 7 found, then you will return it, right? Then again if you see, this is again a why I'm calling it a brute force, right? Because it's not a brute force, it's a brute force. And how you are finding it? Because if you see time complexity, so if you are fixing one element and then you are searching for 7 in entire playlist again, right? And you are doing this, so the searching for 7 is order n, right? Because you're searching for every element, and if you are doing this thing for each element, then n into n, so it is an n square approach, right? So that's why that is again a brute force, right? Because why it is a brute force? Because what I think from my experience is, from my intuition is, it can be done in order n, right? If think wisely and if think smartly, so it can be done in order n. So that's why I'm thinking there is a chance of more optimized approach, more optimized solution for this. So that's why I'm calling it a brute force, okay? And now if you see let's try to optimize it. Let's try to make use of whatever we have learned till now, data structures and algorithm, and how we can use of this. So again in approach, if you think, so from brute force, from coming up from brute force to optimize, it needs a knowledge of data structures, algorithm, and your practice. So if you see here redundancy, what you are doing is you are fixing 2 and you are iterating every element, then you are fixing 7 and then you are finding out its complement, which is 2, and then you are again iterating. So again you are iterating again and again, which is the redundancy here. So that's why one way to optimize this is very clear, right? If you know somehow you know like 7 exists in my data or not, right? In fast, not in order n, in fast, then definitely that is an optimization. So that's why here picture comes in of HashMap, right? So HashMap will help you from a data set. It will help you in finding out some element in order 1, right? So that's why we will use HashMap here. And now I will explain you again approach in 2-3 lines, right? So what I will do is I will iterate through the entire list, then I will try to find out complement. I will find out complement of this number. So here complement is like 9 minus 2, 7. So 7 is our complement, and I will try to find out 7. And to find out 7, I will use HashMap because that is order 1, right? So and also if index is, if the question was to just return elements, then definitely you won't need index. So you can do that through set also, because set don't need key value pair. But here since index is also needed, that's why I'm using HashMap, because I want to keep track of indices also. Okay, so then I will do that, and in this way I will explain to my interviewer like I will use HashMap to find out index in order 1, and that's why overall time complexity will be order n. So that's why this looks like an optimized approach. Then I will explain this approach to my interviewer, and then I will tell shall I go ahead with coding. In that way you can ask, right? And if he has given green tick, then we will code. Now to code, let's start coding of this. Okay, so I'm just coding. So first thing that we need to do here is we need to just iterate the entire array, right? So I'm just iterating the entire array. So and let's call it num. Okay, so because we are creating num in enumerate. So enumeration is very good feature of Python, which will help you in enumerating any list. Okay, so I'm just enumerating it, I'm just copy pasting it. Now I forgot to create an HashMap, right? So basically why I want HashMap, because I want to create num to index list, num to index. Okay, so HashMap is quite straightforward in Python to create. So this list basically will just have number and its index. Okay, and as I keep on moving, I will try to update this, right? So let's now try to find its complement. So if you see complement, so complement here is like target number. Okay, target, sorry I'm very bad at typing, target minus num. So I found out complement here, right? And now if my complement in num to index, if we found out this complement, then we will directly return, I will directly just return complement num to index. Okay, so I'm just returning complement, and then I will return num also. Okay, and why I'm returning complement first, because I want to return element in increasing order, but it was not given in the question, but I'm assuming through the example it should be first. Whoever occurs first, just return that. Okay, so that is done. And then also after this I will update my HashMap, right? Because now I have a new element in the HashMap. So I'm just updating my HashMap once again. Yeah, in the for loop itself I will update my HashMap, because now I have a new entry in the HashMap, and its index is num comma equal to I. Okay, so this is done, and then we will simply return empty array if nothing is found, right? So this is how I coded it in less than 5 minutes. Okay, and let's see, there is some error syntax, return was outside the def. So basically in Python it's all indentation based, so you have to return it here. Okay, I'm hoping there might, okay, so it's returning a wrong answer, right? Target is 9, output is 0,7, but expected is 0,1. Okay, because I am returning num, but I have to return I here. So in that way you can debug also quite easily. It's done, and let's submit it now. Okay, let's see how it performed. Okay, it's done, and if you can see here, right, it's time complexity, it's 64 millisecond. Okay, and also for your information, I attempted it to code through brute force that I explained you earlier, right, finding out all pair. And if you can see here, time complexity is around 2167 millisecond, right? So it's quite huge. It's around like 30x higher, right? So you can also code it yourself, brute force, and then compare. So that is done. And also one more thing, this is like a thing in Python where you will define the signature. So signature is also very important to explain before coding. So you will take list and target as an input and return as like a list, like 2 numbers so you need to return. Okay, so in that way you can do. So this is how I coded, and if you send code, it looks quite less, right? It's around 10 lines. So in most of the interviews, your code won't exceed more than 20 lines if you are coding in Python and if your approach is correct. Now let's jump on. So if you see the time, right, so I have taken around like 15 minutes to explain it and also to solve the question. So that is the ideal time, and you also want to achieve this level if you want to crack coding interview easily. Now let's jump on to our next question. That is the extension of this question itself. And now suppose your interview asked you, now find out all the pairs who are having count of pairs who are having some x. Okay, so suppose that was the question now. So if you are giving interviews, most probably if you are giving interviews for a good company, then they want to know your thought process, how you are able to break down the problem into small problems, and then how you are able to use your previous code in the next questions, how you are able to continue and then solve the next bigger problem. Okay, so here our next question is, right, so in extension of this question itself, and now your interview is asking you to find out pairs count also. Okay, so I've just like pasted the questions from Geeks and I'm just like iterating it again to you. Okay, so suppose this array is given to you, which is 1571 now, and you want to have number 6, and you want to find out all pairs who are giving number 6, right? So if you can clearly see brute force will be exactly same like before, because I'm just trying to find out every pair, and then I will check among those pairs whosever sum is 6, then I will return it, and then for that I will use nested loop and I can find out it very easily. So here answer is 1,5, which is 6, and also 7, -1, which is also 6, right? So just take care of like negative numbers as well here. Now this is the question. We, as I said, we have to spend just 5 to 10 minutes, and because this was the extension of previous question, it was quite easy to understand, and in one line you can explain also. This time, so what you have to explain to interviewer is like, okay, this time we have to just find count. Okay, we have to just not return first pair, we have to count, we have to find out count as well, we have to find total count. That's done. Now let's think of an approach. So brute force you can explain similarly to like previous question. I will iterate all the pair and then I will just return pairs who are having some 6, correct, by using nested loop, and that will be n square complexity. Now to optimize it further, as I used HashMap previously to find out the indices, but here if you can think smartly, right, here what you need, if you want 1, right, you want its complement, so its complement is 5. So if somehow you are able to find out count of complement, if somehow you are able to find out count of complement, then your question is solved, right? You will just keep adding those on. So in 1-2 line you need to explain this approach. So now this time, so let me try to explain how I will explain. So basically this time what I will do, I will iterate and I will try to find out the count of complement for a particular number, and I will sum that number to final count. Okay, and in that way I will return the final count, and I will use HashMap I will use basically HashMap to keep that count, and whenever I am iterating, I will just keep on updating my HashMap so that it won't count duplicate again. So there is one thing, if you create the HashMap in beginning, then you have to take care of that duplication thing, right? For example, if you have created the HashMap in the beginning and then you are again iterating, or if you are iterating HashMap, then it creates quite complication because you need to avoid duplication. For example, when you are at 1, you will find out 5 and you will add it. Now if you are at 5, then you will find out 1, then it will leads to duplication. So that's why there is one very good way to do this is like, don't while you are like creating HashMap, at that time only just try to find out count, right? Just like in one iteration, try to update HashMap as well as try to find out count, so that it won't that reverse pairs won't count again and again. Reverse means 1 5 and 5 1. Okay, so now let's see how I will code it. So this is done. So if you can see, right, in 5 minutes I have explained. Now let's code it. So I think this is quite a straightforward to code. So I will use my like previous code itself, like most of the part of that, and now I will just create a frequency map. Okay, and I'm just initializing it to default int. So let me use default dictionary, because if something is not there, some complement is not there, what I will do is I will just try to Okay, so default dictionary I'm creating, and it's of integer type. So this is a very good data structure in Python. So what it do is it will initialize your dictionary with what dictionary value, right? If some key doesn't exist in dictionary, and if you are trying to find out value of that key, then it will return default value for that default value for that key. For example, if you are trying to find out value of 1 in this hash map, since 1 doesn't exist right now, and if you are trying to find out 1 value, then it will return 0, because int default is 0 in Python. So that is done, and now let's initialize our answer. So that is also 0 right now, and let me now just iterate. So I'm iterating, I'm trying to find out complement, which is k minus num. Okay, and then I will just keep on counting, and now I will just count it. So if you see here, I have counted count equal to, just I added this thing, frequency map of complement. So if complement doesn't exist, then I will add up 0 here, right? So that's why I don't need to write that if else logic while searching for a key in map, right? So that's why it's a very good way to initialize a map, and just try to use that. And we will use this in our various algorithms ahead which are related to graphs, so that there it is also quite useful. And now what I'm doing is I'm just like updating the frequency map, right? So I'm just once again, this is the map. So frequency map of num, I'm just trying to update the num count to 1. So I've increased the frequency of that element also, so that's why it won't count again and again, right? Because what you are doing here is 1. For example, let's see example of this. So 1, I will explain you with an example in a second, but let me just try to complete this first. Okay, now you are returning just count. Okay, running count. Okay, so that is done, if you can see, and let's try to run it for n. So I have already mocked it, and let's see how many pairs it. Okay, so it returned 2, right? That's perfectly worked. And let me now explain the code and time complexity to you. So here, if I see 1, so how we will explain this code is we are iterating this, right? We are finding 1, and then we are finding out complement of 1. So complement of 1 is 5, and 5 is not in array, right? So that's why it didn't do anything. And then we will come to 5, and we are also updating frequency of 1, which will become 1. So now our map will become 1 and 1. And now when we come to 5, then it will try to find out complement of 5 again, which is 1. And now as you see, like frequency of 1 is 1, so that's why count is 1. And if you can see, as I said, right, since we are updating frequency in for loop itself, it won't leads to duplication, and it will return the correct answer. So with that being said, now the final parts comes around is time complexity. So here time and space complexity, so you are doing, so through code you can explain, right? So this part is taking order 1, right? Just initializing dictionary. This part is taking order n, right? And this part is like searching in map. So this is the optimization that we did from brute force, and this is order 1. So you can say this like an order 1 complexity, because it's constant time, right? It's a constant time because it's based on HashMap. Once again, where is the comment section? Okay, so it's HashMap, so it's definitely order 1. So that's why order n into order 1, right? So that's why the entire complexity of this operation, okay, so entire complexity of this operation is n into order of 1. So that's why our all complexity is order 1. And now comes the part of space complexity. So if you see space complexity, right, so maximum element that you can have here is like size of an array, right? If all elements are distinct, then size of an array, which is again n, right? So that's why space complexity is also order n. So in that way you can explain, if this question was asked in an interview, then you can explain in this way. So be precise, try to explain correct things, just process in your mind and tell your thought process to interviewer, how you have come up with like an optimized approach, right? So if some new questions also asked in some interview, which many good companies asked, right, then also you will be able to solve this kind of a question if your approach is correct. So yeah, bye, have a nice day and happy coding.